Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to today's webinar on navigating the NDIS. Today, many of us are joining you from Ngunnawal country. I would like to pay my respects to anyone of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander descent who's joining the webinar today, and also acknowledge the people in the group and the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting across the country. I'd also like to acknowledge the NDIA. We're proud to be delivering projects with the support of the Peer Support and Capacity Building Project with the grant from the NDIA. Together, we're supporting people with disabilities to build skills, strengthen connections, and engage with others who understand their journey. The webinar today is structured around the information that people with lived experience have told us that they want to know. From the outside, the NDIS can be complicated and difficult to navigate. However, internationally, the NDIS is the envy of the world and without a doubt the single biggest game changer for people living with MND in Australia. Recently, the introduction of the priority pathway has dramatically improved the system and how people with MND can navigate the system. And on the whole, it's working really well. But as I said, it can seem complicated, which is why we're bringing you our esteemed panelists and experts today. We have 4 people talking to you today. We'll start with an introduction from the MND Australia Policy and Advocacy Manager, Susan Morey, and then go into a panel discussion with 3 wonderful panelists. We have Skye Vale, who's the Director of the NDIA Priority Pathway and manages the team that support the planning work within the NDIS. We have Kim Hamilton, who's the Manager of MND Advisor and Support Coordination Services at MND Victoria. Kim brings a deep understanding of the issues people with MND encounter in navigating the NDIS and the crucial role that MND advisors and support coordinators can play. And we have the wonderful Sarah Sullivan, who's a senior OT with the statewide service in Victoria led by Calvary Bethlehem. Sarah has many years of assessing changing needs, preparing evidence and the reports for the NDIS, as well as developing the workforce skills in this area. Between them, they bring the collective perspectives from the NDIA, from MND services and clinical practice, and are well placed to explore the questions that people with MND and lived experience have told us matter most. Following the panel discussion, we'll have time for question and answers. If you have a question for the panelists, please pop it in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, and these will be sent to me and I'll put them to the panel. To start off with, I'd like to introduce Susan to talk about recent advocacy with the NDIA and NDIS and the current situation. Susan.
Hi, thanks, Claire, and it's great to be here, and it's nice to see so much interest in this webinar. I've been asked as the Policy and Advocacy Manager to talk a little bit about, give a little overview on the priority pathway, to talk a little bit about the advocacy that we do and how that fits in with the self-advocacy that is the focus for this seminar today. So to start with a little bit of background on the priority pathway, the NDIS itself was established in 2013, and it is for people aged below 65 years who have a permanent disability. We did have quite a few questions in advance around aged care, and that is not the focus of this seminar. But I am going to mention it briefly that if you are aged 65 or above when you receive your diagnosis of motor neuron disease, you are supported by My Aged Care. But if you have been accepted onto the NDIS, you are on that for life. So once you cross that 65-year barrier, you continue to have your NDIS package if you've already been approved for one. We do a lot of advocacy around aged care, and if you want to hear more about that, just get in touch. In 2024, the priority access pathway was established. And the data that we've received from the NDIA on this told us that after 18 months, fewer than 1,000 people have accessed the pathway. So it's not a huge number. And about 80% of those people had cancer terminal diagnosis. About 10% have been diagnosed with MND. So it's actually a very small number of people from the MND community who access the priority pathway, but we know it's incredibly effective at supporting people. And next slide, please, Renee. So I wanted to talk a little bit about advocacy because this is part of my role, but it's also the focus of this seminar. Today we're talking about self-advocacy, and that is speaking up for your immediate needs and your experiences. What we do here at the office, what I oversee, is the system advocacy or systemic advocacy, it's sometimes called. And this is really focused on how system level settings can create poor outcomes for not just one person, but for many people. And this might include how legislation is written, the norms of how services provided, how procedures work, or possibly differential access where some people can access something and someone else cannot. So these are kind of bigger issues that affect a lot of people. Next slide, Renee. There it is. I wanted to talk a little bit about advocacy as a spectrum because on one side, you do have the self-advocacy where you're talking about your immediate needs. On the other side is that system advocacy that we do from this office, which is looking at barriers that are created for a lot of people. But it's actually a spectrum, and there's a lot of in-between space. So if you start on the left of this graphic, the most basic self-advocacy is just talking to healthcare providers, funding bodies, other people who might be part of your network of care support about what your needs are and what you need. If you're not getting that, then the next box along there is to request a reassessment or submitting a complaint, something along those lines. If you're still not getting traction, that third box there talks about meeting with your government representative about your situation. And we have a lot of people in the MND community who have gone to see their member about problems that they might be experiencing having their needs met. And then something else that a lot of people in the community have done is going directly to the press or other public-facing media and talking about the issues. And this is where you're starting to become more public-facing in what you're saying. And it could be that you're talking about things that impact not just you, but lots of people. And then you're really getting more into system advocacy when you start sharing your story for a government submission, which many people have done. You may meet with government about issues that impact the whole community and not just you. And last year there was a very active group that was meeting with people about the needs we have around data and getting that funded. And then over on the far end, you can actually write your own government submission when the government has an inquiry open. Individual members of the community are welcome to submit something, or you may go speak at a public hearing or something like this. So this is very much in the system advocacy side of things. Next slide, Renee. Oh, we're missing one. Sorry, I will just talk to it. We have done a bit of recent systemic advocacy on the NDIS, which I wanted to let you know about. First off, we do know that there's been a lot of media around legislative changes that have gone through just this month. We're not sure how that will impact the priority pathway, but we actually do not expect any change to that. There's nothing to be concerned about at this stage. We have talked to the government about the things that we see as the real gold standard in the priority pathway. And a big win for us in June was that Minister Butler actually acknowledged the priority pathway, which had not had any public acknowledgement up to that point. And they've committed to it. So that's a really wonderful outcome for us in the MND community. The other things that we told them is having that specialized team support is critical. Having adequate and timely funding needs to be retained, and that being able to access reassessments as needed is really important. And they've listened to that, and we expect all that to remain a part of the priority pathway. If there appears to be changes in how you're accessing your NDIS support, and you think that may be caused by systemic barriers, which we talked about the legislative framework, the norms, the access, please do let someone know. You can talk to your state MND association. You can contact us at that email. And if we start to see a pattern, we can investigate that and escalate it on our end. It also just helps us to understand how things are being rolled out as things go through. So it's really useful to us keeping that finger on the pulse. That's everything I had. I'm going to hand back to Claire, and we'll get into the panel.
Fantastic. Thank you, Susan. And credit where credit's due, a lot of our recent successes with the government are because of Susan's policy advice and really sharp recommendations. And what we're hearing from you, the community, in what's going wrong and what needs improving. This session is really about self-advocacy. It's about what tools and supports and systems are in place to help you navigate the NDIS. So I'm going to jump into the panel session now. I'd like to start by asking Kim regarding the role of state MND associations and who can help people with MND navigate the NDIS, and what does each person actually do?
Thanks, Claire. And Renee, we might just pop up that first slide. But yeah, look, today we really want to share with you that there is a big team of people available to help you navigate and make sense of the NDIS. And this slide lists some of those primary roles, which we'll talk through. So I would like to start with the MND state associations, which are an extremely useful place for people who have been affected by motor neuron disease to turn to for support and information. There are MND associations across Australia, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Western Australia, with MND Victoria offering services in Tasmania and MND New South Wales covering ACT and the Northern Territory. Each state association does offer a different range of services to people with MND, their carers, family, and the health professionals who support them. All the states have teams of MND advisors who are experts in MND and navigating the NDIS system. Their role is to help you from the first step of considering if the NDIS is right for you, through the process of applying to become a participant, and we do this directly through the MND priority pathway, which Skye will share more on shortly. We support people with the practicalities of the access request form, gathering any evidence, also completing a pre-planning process to really help people get ready for that first interaction with the NDIA, starting to help you understand the language, the NDIS guidelines, and also the idea of considering your goals, so those specific outcomes and aspirations you want to achieve, which is what the NDIS plans are built on. All the state associations are registered providers of NDIS supports, offering support coordination to those with an approved plan. As you'll see, once you have an NDIS plan, you're known as a participant, which means you've met those eligibility requirements to receive NDIS supports. A support coordination is funded in a plan and provides access to that support coordinator. But what do these support coordinators do? So they are really there to help you understand and use your plan, bringing all those services together. But they are there to work for you, the participant, and you remain in control and call all the shots. I like to, I guess, refer to a support coordinator as a bit like a translator, someone who can help you understand this new and unfamiliar language, the rules, the guidelines, and the legislation of the NDIS. They will support you to choose providers and make those referrals. They will assist you to connect with the NDIS portal. They complete reporting, providing updates and information directly to our team of planners. We really can become the support coordinator, the conduit between you, all of your NDIS providers, and your wider care team and supporters. Really, the goal of that support coordinator is to help alleviate any of that potential burden associated with managing your NDIS services and supports so you can focus on what's important to you. The state associations do offer some other services funded by the NDIA. Many will know of our equipment loan systems, which is very unique and recognises that timely access to equipment is critical to quality of life. MND Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland stock common items of equipment which can be loaned on recommendation from an allied health professional. Funding from the NDIA helps us maintain this amazing service. MND Queensland, WA and South Australia are also registered to deliver some allied health supports. Look, I would encourage you to contact your local association to find out more about those specific service offerings. Another key person it can be a plan manager who helps keep track of your funding. They really are there to handle the financial and administrative tasks of overseeing your NDIS plan, similar to that of a bookkeeper. Look, not reflected on this slide is the whole range of NDIS providers that can become involved and will become involved over time. And they can be a person, a business, an organisation that delivers NDIS-related supports, from allied health professionals to those support workers. So I hope that gives a bit of an overview of some of the key people that are involved. And before I hand to Sky, look, I would like to say that the priority pathway and the team of planners that we get to work with are incredible. And look, I've been involved with the NDIA before the pathway, and this arrangement is really first class. And we are privileged to have a really integrated model of collaboration with the NDIA that has enabled a more positive experience and better outcomes for people with MND accessing the NDIS. Sky, I'll hand to you, I think, at this point to talk more about that planning team.
Well, thank you, Kim. Firstly, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank everyone who has organised this session for inviting myself. It's a really great opportunity to have the ability to talk to the community in a different way to the way that we would often engage. I guess I just wanted to go back and reflect on where we began. In 2024, as Susan spoke about before, there was representation from the MND associations that identified the necessity for a different response to support people with MND. That occurred in early 2024, and by the 1st of July 2024, the NDIA had responded, and I was privileged enough to be given the responsibility to set a team up, which is a nationalised team. So we commenced on the 1st of July and started what we call the priority pathway, which is what I'm going to talk to you about. The priority pathway is a dedicated team of, or a dedicated point of contact and team of planners primarily who are in place to be able to provide individualised supports in almost I guess we refer to it as a case management model, or a dedicated point of contact, which allows each one of our participants to be allocated a planner, and that planner is the person that becomes very responsible for supporting you through your NDIA experience. There's a couple of other aspects to, I guess, the priority pathway, which includes what we also call the priority access pathway. MND, people with MND do go through the priority access pathway. And what we seek to do is that we seek to try to make really quick decisions for access to ensure that people get onto the NDIA as soon as possible, so that we can get plans in place and funding in place for supports to be available. That pathway is very swift. Once we get all of the information that we require, the information and the evidence that we require about an individual, decisions for getting access to the NDIA usually occur within no longer than a 5-day period. My team are heavily involved in that process as well. So whilst that is managed, or the decisions are managed by what we call our scheme eligibility branch, we perform, I guess, an unusual role in that we will work with people from pre-access. That's a special, I guess, a unique component of the way that we run this pathway and set this pathway up, to ensure that we are supporting people with MND right through the process from the first touch point with the agency. Once we receive access, the planners are responsible for completing a first plan for a participant. We have made a commitment to ensure that we get first plans in place by no longer than 30 days. We are currently operating at an average of 17 days of getting a first plan into place. And that's been maintained for, we're heading towards 2.5 years down of the pathway being in place, and so we've been able to maintain that average number of days over that period of time. Sometimes we have to seek some additional guidance from other parts of our business, and that may result in a few extra days or a week or etc. in getting a plan funded and in place. But the other part and the other aspect and the opportunity that we've had is to be able to work quite strongly with other parts of our business that allow us to get decisions in place as quickly as possible. So whilst I talk about the priority access pathway and with scheme eligibility and having a priority pathway with them, we also have the same that we have set up, and we did so from the beginning with other aspects of the business. So people with MND, and once we put them through to the other parts of our business, it's identified as being a priority participant, and is often considered to be highest priority, and the actions are taken really swiftly in order to get us a decision through and the funding in place. So we have set up all aspects of our connections internally to ensure that we have this priority pathway working and operating, which is not reliant just solely on what the planners can action, but it also supports other aspects of the business. Probably inclusive of that is also the fact that we have a small administrative team that sits alongside all of the planners. This is a critical component to the way that we operate, because it is those people that actually ensure that the work is moved really swiftly through our system in order to get to our planners. So as Kim identified, we've got really strong relationships with support coordinators with the association, and we work together often in order to support all of our participants with MND. We've been very fortunate to have this priority pathway in place, and after 2.5 years, we actually have the exact same people that started 2.5 years ago, which would indicate I guess the joy, if you would like to call it that the people within this team experience in being able to operate in such a manner and having those really strong relationships with our participants and all of our stakeholders. Thanks, Claire. I'll pass back to you.
Thank you. And it is fantastic what we have in place through the priority pathway and what your team are doing for us. So thank you. Kim, once you have a plan in place, how do you make it work?
Thanks, Claire. I think that's a really important question, because we really do want to make sure that once you've got this plan, it is doing what it's intended to do. And as you mentioned, it can be really daunting and overwhelming, and there is a lot involved and a lot to navigate. So hopefully I can share some tips today which will help you feel more informed and empowered to make that plan work for you. Look, to encourage a really successful experience, it is highly encouraged that you seek out that support coordinator to work alongside you and your family, whether that's from an MND association or that can happen externally from the state associations as well. But within the association, we would be able to meet with you as your support coordinator and really walk you through the plan. We refer to this as that kind of plan implementation meeting and conversation. So it's through that process we'll work to explain the details in a really simple and easy to understand way. As I've said, it's about us trying to be that translator for you. So Renee, we might pop up the slide. And look, it really starts, I think, right at the beginning in terms of helping you understand what has been funded in your NDIS plan. So what are the supports, services, equipment or items you can get with the funding that's sitting within your NDIS plan? Understanding this right from the start will help you succeed and really ensure your plan does what it's intended to do. And that really involves going through each section of your plan and explaining the supports. Often we'll see supports broken into 4 categories. Sometimes within those categories, there are some different subgroups. But this slide does just highlight those 4 key areas. Again, they're funded based on your individual needs and circumstances, but we'll often see funding allocation there for course supports, so to help you with everyday activities. And that might be things like having someone come in to help showering or dressing or helping you to access the community. Often within this budget area, we might also see some funding for what's known as consumables or low-cost AT. That could be things like continence aids. If your needs are there, you might have some funding for capital supports, which refers to assistive technologies, home modifications, and for some people, specialist disability accommodation. You might also see some funding within your plan for capacity building supports, so being able to bring in those allied health professionals, as well as that's where that support coordination funding sits as well. There can be a budget for reoccurring transport supports as well. So as that support coordinator, we'll explain all of this in detail, including the amount of money that's been allocated to each support category and whether that money can be used flexibly or whether that money's been put in there as stated, which means it can only be used for a specific item. Often that can be around an assistive technology need. It's important to understand with plans that there are funding periods, which is the available money which can be used towards those supports, and that's usually set for a defined period. I guess, again, as that support coordinator can really help you kind of set the budget, considering those total amounts, the cost of the supports that you intend to access, access and ensuring those supports are set up in a sustainable way over those funding periods. It's not too dissimilar to us just needing to manage, household budgets in other areas of our life. The next key thing to really make sure your plan works for you is finding the right people to work with you and to deliver the supports. The support coordinator can help guide you to choose the right providers for your needs and circumstances. We would encourage you to hopefully engage with someone that understands motor neuron disease, or many of the associations can also provide education to help upskill those providers. A support coordinator can research, present you with options, and support you to connect in with all of the services to help build that team around you. The next phase then is around monitoring those supports, ensuring they're working best for you, and also responding when things might not be going so well. I know it might be unpopular and that people would like us to be able to talk specifically about what the NDIS does and does not fund, but that is a really difficult question because the scheme is set up to fund things that are specific to each particular individual around their circumstances and their goals. The NDIA does have a framework around what's considered reasonable and necessary supports and has some great resources available that do list what are and aren't considered NDIS supports. And those resources can be shared with you following this webinar. Any of those specific individual questions, it's really about coming back to your support coordinator or Sky's team, that assigned planner, there to really work through your individual circumstances and questions. But common examples of things not funded are day-to-day living costs, so things like your mortgage or your bills, groceries. But there are 37 categories of services, items, and equipment funded. And again, that will be linked to your particular individual needs and circumstances. Renee, I might just get you to pop up the next slide. One other important area to understand and make sure that your plan is working well for you is about what arrangements are in place to manage the funding within your plan. So who's going to pay your providers and manage those financial records and help keep track of your budget and your spend. What I want to just mention here is understanding the difference between NDIS registered providers and unregistered providers. So an NDIS registered provider has been formally approved by the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission to deliver services and supports to participants. Those providers must pass quality audits to prove that they meet the practice standards of the NDIS. Those registered providers cannot charge more than the pricing limits that have been set by the NDIA, and they're actively monitored by the Commission. Where, as you would know where I'm going, is unregistered providers do not undergo those same quality audit checks. So it's really important that you just understand the difference, but there are different arrangements that can occur through these funding options. And often it is actually really good to think about this during that pre-planning phase, so before your plan is built, but these arrangements can be updated during your plan period as well. So as you'll see on the slide, look, it does talk through 3 options, or there can be combinations of these options set up around your budget and your funding. One being having the NDIA being that responsible person to pay your providers and manage those financial records. With this arrangement, you can only use those registered providers of the NDIA. Some people might want to look to self-manage their own funding or have a nominee do that and be involved in directly paying your providers. This does give you an option to use those unregistered providers in the market. The other option is to have a third party involved, which pays the providers on your behalf and maintains those records. That does give you the option to also use unregistered providers. It's just an important thing to be mindful of. Plans might have a combination of these arrangements. There might be certain items that the NDIA will set as agency managed, or put certain arrangements in place for certain different scenarios. I guess just in summary to that question, Claire, I think it's about getting things right from the start. It's about being able to translate the plan from paper into what are the supports I can access, what are those costs, what does that mean in terms of the amount of hours, who's going to deliver those supports that are right for me, and then having that ongoing monitoring and review of those arrangements, again, to make sure it's achieving what it's set out to do for you and to help you live that best quality of life.
Really good intel, Kim. Thank you. Sarah, I might throw to you to help us explain and understand how you best ensure your needs are understood when decisions are being made.
Look, I think as an OT, I want to preface this by saying I've been an OT working with people with MND long before the NDIS was a thing in everybody's lives. And before I answer that question, I would just like to really give some perspective around the previous funding schemes that we had available to us for people with MND, which were limited, which were block funded, which lacked the ability for an individual to have choice on provider, on therapist, on who delivered the supports. And I think despite, some of the limitations that people perceive the NDIA to have around the legislation and around the arduous reporting and the planning, it has actually delivered and has allowed people with MND to live potentially much more fulfilling lives and have much more appropriate options available to them to allow them to live the life that they would like within a body that is maybe not doing what they imagined it would do. And so I want to really kind of focus on the fact that the reporting around the NDIA really had to change by allied health professions, specifically OTs, because the NDIA require evidence, and that's a legislative requirement, but the way we used to write reports had to really change. And I think as a therapist who transitioned from the old schemes into the new schemes, and as an OT who's been around for a really long time, I really had to change the language that I used in my reports to ensure that the people that I was working with got the right outcomes. So we hear a lot about functional assessments reports, and that was a term that the NDIA created. That was not, sorry, there's someone washing the window. Not something that was a thing in terms of my life for a very long time. So the functional assessment reports you hear all the time, they cost $3,000, $4,000. There's all this sort of, kind of these big reports. But regardless of what is being requested, the functional assessment reports are basically what the planners look at to then translate the information provided into those budgets that Kim talked about. Now, a good report, I think, consists of very clear picture of what the person's goals are. What is important to them? What does their house look like? Who are they living with? What do they want to do? And that's when Kim was talking about the goals. Now, for someone who has just been diagnosed with MND, I would like to really address that having to write goals in this early process is a really kind of weird thing to do. I often will say to people, along with the MND Association who might be working with my people, we just need to make some goals broad. I want to stay in my house. I want to be able to talk to the people I want to talk about. I want to live a good life. I want to be able, keep them really broad, because that means that anything that may change in the future still can be related to those goals. I think in terms of the reports, I personally don't tend to write a report with lots of standardized assessments in it. I think there's two reasons for that. One, for people with conditions that change over a course of time, they go out of date really quickly. Two, putting someone who's just been diagnosed with MND through a standardized functional assessment is something they don't need in their life at that time. Now, that is my choice that I've made as a therapist for, I suppose, good quality rapport building, good quality trust with the people that I work with. And I've never had an issue with that so far with the priority pathway that have probably read, I don't know, 300 of my reports over the last year. So a good report will include, yes, the goals agreed with the person, a good functional description, and I lean on my knowledge of MND phenotypes and potentially where the changes in someone's body have started with to guide through the recommendations. Now, when I do reports mostly from initial functional assessment report through the MND clinic, and then when I work in the NDIS service, obviously ongoing reports, plan review reports, AT reports, whatever. Now, the first functional assessment reports are, when I'm talking to people about them, I do acknowledge that they are awful to read for someone just diagnosed with MND. And I really want to put that out there for those people living with MND who've maybe just been diagnosed, that they are awful. And I often talk about the fact that we want to write these reports, and Sky understands this, and I think this is where the priority pathway really kind of comes into its own, is that we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what 3 months, 6 months is going to look like, but 20 years of experience has, allowed me to talk to people about what potentially might happen. And the fact is the priority pathway is designed to be able to put in a review if needed. We do talk about planning for the worst, hoping for the best. And the other thing I want to acknowledge is around the MND equipment services. Now, these services, the equipment services, existed long before the NDIS. In our previous funding models, we couldn't get equipment fast enough for people with MND through any of the state equipment services, whether they were, MASS, SWEP, CAPE, whatever state you lived in. It used to take 6 months to get a shower chair. So the MND Association equipment has existed long before the NDIS, and there was clear reasons around that, because we needed fast, responsive, rapidly, the ability to swap in and swap out bits of equipment to ensure that people were safe and being able to do what they want to do. Now, the NDIA, I suppose, took a little bit of time to work out that existed, because it was something that the state associations had created through volunteering and donations. And so I think in any report, we want to have some reference to whatever state you are living in or whatever state you are working in, some reference to include some money towards this kind of ability to have equipment swapped in and out. The other thing that I do in my reports is make it very clear. So clear in terms of function, what equipment's being needed, how many people need to help someone. And then some recommendations around each of the budgets. So the core budget, the capital budget, and the capacity building budget. It is well acknowledged internationally that multidisciplinary team is required to ensure that people can live their best lives. No one can dispute that. So ensuring that there is some reference towards, even if someone doesn't need a particular therapist at the time, I think the priority pathway totally understand that even though they may not need a dietitian or a speech pathologist or an OT right at this moment, that in 8 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, that might be needed. So that I can see that the plans that are coming through from the priority pathway, when that's clearly written in a functional assessment, there is money there for what, and they're often flexible budgets. And I think that's where the priority pathway don't make those capacity building budgets stated supports. They keep them flexible because the allied health needs of someone with MND may ebb and change over the course of things happening. So yes, I just really think that the reports are clear. They are written in a way that the planner can translate the information into the budgets, and that the participant understands that although therapists have to write these words, we call them in a risk-based scenario rather than a kind of functional-based scenario where we have to talk about the risks if supports are not provided rather than the benefits if they are, is just the way we have to do it. And I think therapists who work in this area a lot with people with MND are pretty open about having those conversations. Sorry, that was very long-winded.
No, fantastic.
I
Thank
do
you
think
very much.
perspective, I know I went a bit into the olden days, but I think perspective for newer participants is maybe a bit of a relief, maybe a bit of something like, I must admit, before the NDIA had things like specialist disability accommodation open to us, the only option for anyone who had high care needs and couldn't live at home anymore was to go into a residential aged care facility. When the NDIA came in, for about the first 6 years, I spent a lot of time getting people under 65 out of their nursing homes into more appropriate accommodation. And I think that has been one of the hugest benefits to this.
Yeah, fantastic advice. Sky, I wanted to ask you, given MND changes so quickly, how can people plan ahead so that NDIS supports keep pace with the changing needs?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I think there's a few different aspects to this. Some of it is a little bit of taking advice from what Sarah has just been talking about in relation to making sure that there's an engagement with perhaps allied health who do have an understanding of MND, who can really clearly articulate the needs that are now, but also what are the identified needs that are going to probably happen quite immediately or quite soon into the future. The ability for us to get evidence and information to support us to make reasonable decisions and sensible decisions in some ways that would allow for a reduction in the number of times that a person needs to come back to seek further supports is a really critical element of why we put the priority pathway into place, and having this sort of dedicated point of contact with these planners and the relationships, as I described, with other aspects of our business internally. I think that so that goes a long way to potentially resolving the necessity for this continuous need to come back seeking additional supports. However, noting that I say that, we also are working with a very rapidly progressing neurodegenerative condition, and the predictability on this is very difficult, and the variability between each person and individual is obviously also highly challenging in some instances if we want to try to put this together to make sensible decisions into the future, or supportive decisions. So we do still rely on evidence and information. So the purpose of having the priority planners in place does allow that direct connection. So all of the participants have the direct connection with their planner. They do have the ability to make that necessary contact and seek support for a plan change through changing needs. We do every 12 months a plan reassessment as well. So we do undertake another assessment of need at that particular point in time, but also, as I said, there's a plan change opportunity. Due to the nature of the fact that there is always typically a significant change, then that allows the planner to utilise the information that they've been provided to act upon that pretty quickly. I guess that is very much a key, as I've talked about, it is a key feature of this priority pathway, because instead of going through a general inquiries approach or other general emails or phone numbers, the direct connection is with the planner, so you can get it to the right person almost immediately in order for us to be able to action that. Internally, as a team, we work very strongly, or have a couple of teams actually that are set up to do the MND work, but we work really strongly together. So even in the event that we have a person, one of our planners away on leave, we operate in such a manner that allows us to still pick up requests that are coming through. So they still get actioned really quickly. So I think in terms of, you know, the changing need, the way that we've set this pathway up really supports it. The part that we just need from the participant and the support coordinator is really clear, and allied health is really, really clear information and evidence that allows us to make really quick decisions. The more clear that is, the more information we have, and I'm not talking about reams of information, I'm just talking about the right information, the right evidence, the easier and the quicker it is for us to provide the supports to assist with getting additional funding supports into place.
Fantastic, thank you. Kim, I might throw to you to dive a little more into what happens and what you do if your plan no longer fits your needs.
Sure, thanks, Claire. As Sky started to touch on, there are several options available to you should your plan not be meeting your needs. So we really want to assure people that there are lots of ways that we can respond really proactively to changes that might be happening. Thanks, I think the slide's up. So I'll just start with, I guess, as Sky mentioned, you know, all plans typically have a lifespan. So for a lot of our people living with motor neuron disease, can be around a 12-month plan. So all those plans will have a clear reassessment date. So that schedule point where that plan will be reviewed, there'll be that check-in conversation about how are those supports and services working for you. And look, this process will usually commence 2 to 3 months before the end date of the plan through your support coordinator and the planner. It's about talking with you about how your plan's going, whether we need to look at requesting different supports or potentially new funding amounts. So that support coordinator's role, again, as Sky said, that's about gathering the right information and putting that information to the planner for that reassessment discussion. So it's about that actively looking ahead and planning for that renewal date, which is that having that clear reassessment of the plan. But look, as Sky said, we understand that due to the nature of motor neuron disease, you know, people's needs may change before we get to that 12-month mark. But we've got a really quick, efficient way of requesting that, you know, unplanned reassessment. So our role as the support coordinator is to be working closely with you, that wider team. As Sarah mentioned, it's about having that strong multidisciplinary involvement of all of the right people to understand and anticipate the changes that might be occurring for you. So if things are starting to look different, we will be communicating, you know, in real time to the planners to be discussing the best approach to ensure that the NDIS supports can keep up with those changing needs and changing circumstances. So having that direct link and that direct relationship ensures a really timely response to that reassessment when things really aren't working and we do need to get some quick action within a plan. One of the other options I just wanted to mention was around a plan variation. Look, it's about the ability to have one kind of part of your chair plan changed. For example, it might be around changing that funding management arrangement. You know, you might have opted to self-manage and that's no longer working for you, and we can request a quick just change to that current plan to put that in play. I think, Sky, you were going to talk about internal reviews, but I also just want people to know and to feel empowered that Also, if your providers are not working for you, you're not locked in and you can change those at any stage as well. So that includes your support coordinator. That can also include any of the other providers engaged within your NDIS plan. You always have choice and control. So if that's also not working for you, yeah, you absolutely can make changes.
Thank you, Kim. And yes, Sky, internal reviews, appealing decisions. What do you do? What are the formal things you can do if you're unhappy?
Yeah, I think in relation to internal reviews, it is an absolutely critical part of our legislation and one that should be utilised and one that our team will encourage our participants to always utilise. It is a review pathway that is put in place for a reason, and that's because we do want people to take that pathway if they feel unhappy or feel like there has been something that hasn't been funded correctly. We in relation to internal reviews, our teams can often only make a decision in line with legislation and the reasonable and necessary criteria up to a point, because that's the information and evidence we have on hand. And so, of course, when we put that decision into effect, that does then give or open up the opportunity for a participant to then seek an internal review if they are not happy with that decision. Again, as I said before, that is something that we will very much will encourage and provide and support to the best of our ability for a person to take that pathway. It's really critical that if you are going through an internal review process and that is the pathway that you seek to go down, it is really, really critical that one of the things you do is seek additional information and evidence that is going to support your request for whatever it is that you're asking for. Without additional, we see a lot of people that will go through an internal review process or attempt to, but will not necessarily bring any additional information or evidence, and then they will get the same decision as what was previously. The reason for that is because it's been through quite a few different hands in terms of just looking at advice, and the ability to change that is very limited at that point. So additional information and evidence is an absolute critical component of going down an internal review process. What I would encourage everyone to do is, if they want to understand what that should look like or feel like in terms of the evidence, certainly talk to your planner. They will be very supportive and descriptive around, well, what is the missing evidence from, or when I say missing, what could you get that's a little bit more descriptive? And then also, of course, your support coordinator is always a key person to work with to be able to support you with gathering all of the requirements for an internal review. So I think that's a really key thing, and I think a lot of people don't always necessarily quite understand the necessity for that additional information, and rightly so, probably get a little bit frustrated if they are getting the same decision back. But that is possibly one of the reasons why that would be the case.
Yeah, really, really helpful. Thank you, Sky. Thank you, everyone. We've got a bit of time now for questions from the audience. We've had a few come in. If anyone would like to ask a question of anyone on our panel, pop it into the chat and I will relay it to the panel. We have had a couple come in, and our first question is from Melissa. Melissa's question is pretty straightforward. She's just started looking after her mum who has MND and is wondering, how do you get a copy of your plan? I'm going to throw that to you, Sky. Sorry, I should direct a question to someone.
That's all right. Between Kim and I, there's a couple of different options. Probably in terms of it is about getting a copy of your plan, but there's something else that I would encourage people to do as well, which is that planners should always offer what is called a plan implementation meeting after a plan has been approved and the funding is in place. We do have a highly variable rate of people who accept those plan implementation meetings. I would really encourage people to, if they feel up to it, but I would really encourage our participants to accept those plan implementation meetings. The reason for that is because that is where a really robust conversation is in place to explain the nature of what is funded within the plan and how that can be used. It also supports a discussion on what has been declined. Now, in addition to that, we will always send, we always make sure that there is access to a copy of a plan. So part of an email will be also distributed, which does contain a copy of the plan. And the email sometimes will or should, when I say sometimes, it should have a breakdown of the supports and how they can be used. However, in saying that, yes, that is an email, but because sometimes there are some layers of complexity, some of these plans are usually quite extensive for people with MND. A lot of dollars in it, a lot of different funding line items, etc. So I would always encourage having that conversation with your planner around what they call a plan implementation meeting, which is really around being able to be quite descriptive around what that actual plan is funded for and what the usage is. Kim, you might want to. Oh, sorry. Go, Claire.
For someone like Melissa who's just taken over
Yes.
or increased her role in caring for her mum, can you request that plan implementation meeting at any point, like when a new carer comes in, or is it only at conception, like the very start of a plan?
No, well, and perhaps this is sort of what perhaps I missed a little bit at the start when I talked about the planning team. That the priority planners also offer and do undertake a regular check-in. So somewhere between 6 to 12 weeks, we do work with each of the participants to identify what the frequency of contact should be. But that's also a key feature of the way that we operate, is that we do, if a participant wants us to contact them every 4 weeks, then we will mark that down and we create a contact point each 4 weeks or whatever frequency it is. So there is regular contact at all times. So that conversation can take place whenever. And it might not be a full conversation about the plan. It might be just an aspect of the plan or an aspect of what is funded. So, and again, being dedicated point of contact, any question at any stage can be directed to the planner or the support coordinator, but certainly the planner is in the mix with that as well. There should be the ability to make contact with any one of the people that are part of the participants team is really critical to note. But yes, I would suggest just like the ability to make contact is a key feature of the pathway and the way that we operate. So at any stage. Yep.
Kim, you might have some comments on that, but also the next question I'd love you to answer, which is, what if I'm not satisfied with my support coordinator? Can I change, and how do I do that?
Yeah, look, thanks, Claire. As I said, look, it is really important that you form a good, strong connection with who's involved within your team, and that can include that support coordinator role. I guess I can talk from the state association's perspective. Yeah, sometimes people do reach out and let us know that relationship's just not gelling. We can certainly, as a first option, look to offer someone else from within the association, if that's what the person is interested in doing. Alternatively, people can also look to move to an external support coordinator, so someone who's not part of the state M&D association. So there's absolutely always choice and opportunities to review if that relationship is working best for you.
Thank you. Sorry, just looking for my question list. Next one is, if a participant has applied for the NDIS without using the priority pathway, is this automatically flagged in the system somewhere, or how can they get into the priority pathway? And then for new applications, how do they flag their application to be processed through the priority pathway? Sky.
Yes, thanks, Claire. So this is a system that is in place. We do have quite a number of people who do approach the agency through, I guess, the general inquiries or whatever that may be. When an application for access gets to our scheme eligibility branch, it is identified if a person has a diagnosis of MND. It is identified that the person has a diagnosis of MND, and it is then triaged off to the priority access pathway team, where they will support the access decision of that participant, and then they engage directly with my planning team to ensure that then that person gets into the planning team. So essentially, it does get flagged. It should always be picked up by the access team somewhere along the way. If a person has a diagnosis of MND, that decision should be done by the team that I talked about before that try to do a decision within that 5-day period. And then it comes straight to my team for planning, and that's essentially off we go.
Fantastic. Kim, I've got one for Rachel from you. With the change to have funding in quarterly increments, is this something that can be easily reviewed if the participants' needs change?
I'll try and answer that, and then I might lean on Sky as well. I think it fits in with those general principles that we are always reviewing how that funding's working, are things sustainable within that budget period, and having the ability to have conversations with the planners around what's changing, is that budget still working, and trying to come up with some solutions, any kind of necessary solutions to overcome if there's looking like to be a shortfall within that plan period that's originally set. So I might throw to you, Sky, but I guess it is really central on just that communication, us being proactive, us keeping the planners updated. If it's looking like that funding, might fall short, understanding why, and looking at what solutions there are.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Kim. So essentially, we do have the, I guess, ability somewhere along the way to change up or bring funds forward from another funding period to support the current situation. There's a couple of aspects to this. I mean, in the first instance, what we are trying to do is make sure that we do, as I described before, we're trying to make certain that we are putting plans into place that are funding a person for their immediate need and for what we also know is likely to be coming into the near future. So ideally, there may not always be a need for us to change up or bring funding forward because we will have been able to ascertain and make the right decision that what we've got in the plan is going to cover the need for now. But in saying that, we also, again, acknowledge the fact that we are also working with people who do have an unpredictable, rapidly progressing neurodegenerative condition, and that also is that is very understood within my team. And so if we are identifying that those needs have increased significantly over a short period of time, then of course we will make provision for ensuring that supports are able to be continued. We're not in the business to be in a position where people are not having access to their supports. So we will do that. We also will work very swiftly with the associated support coordinators and allied health teams to support us with obtaining the required evidence and information to get that plan funded to the point of making sure that a person's daily support needs are adequately and appropriately covered. So hopefully that has supported the answer.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sky. Sarah, I think this one's for you, but possibly for anyone on the panel. Someone's asked, for allied health professionals, what are the preferred pathways to advocate for the best outcomes for their clients?
Yeah, we were having this discussion recently. Look, Well, one of the things that has happened that I think is, sometimes a little tricky is that the NDIA, the way plans are funded, creates a situation where there might be an OT from here, a physio from here, a speechy from here, a dietitian from here, and they're all from different companies. They may not know each other. That, is because the person has the choice, and that's fine. But what that has created is a go away from what was always considered best practice internationally about having a cohesive, what we used to call interdisciplinary team, because many of the very unusual or significant things that can happen for people with MND, I prefer to work with an interdisciplinary team, things like secretion management, positioning, seating, breathing support. It's not just me, or it's not just the physio, it's not just the speechy. Obviously, it's very kind of cohesive. Now, so in terms of advocating appropriately and getting the right information to the priority pathway, my main advice would be get permission from the person that you are working with to get in touch with other people who are involved in their care and ensure that the information that is being provided to the priority pathway is consistent. Because what happens when you have an OT writing a report and then a physio might write their report and then a speechy might write their report, that the poor planner is having to trawl through all these different reports that may be slightly saying a different thing, and it muddies the waters somewhat. Now, a lot of the time I will try and create a situation. I obviously work in a team where we have all the disciplines, but people may not choose to use all of the disciplines of the team that I work with. So I would try and ensure that information that is being provided by a team is consistent. The therapists talk to each other, that there is some cohesiveness around the data or the information being provided, because that is the one limitation that the NDIA has created, is this situation where therapists may be very separate from each other and may not know each other. It does lead to some inefficiencies, I think, and some practice that is maybe not best practice, because if therapists that are chosen or agree maybe don't know that secretion management can be dealt with as a team rather than just by yourself, then you have this kind of double up, which then costs the NDIA more money and does not lead to good outcomes. So yes, it is very difficult in terms of that. But I just would encourage therapists to get permission from their person that they're working with to try and talk to their colleagues.
I've got another one for you, Sarah. How can the NDIS participant work with their allied health professional who is writing the report to make sure their future needs are met when they need them?
Yeah, look, and I think this comes back a little bit to what Sky and Kim were saying, is that when I do webinars or information sessions for OTs or allied health professionals, and I've done them through various, channels around report writing, it is a bit writing on the worst case scenario and unfortunately leaning on what the data tells us around onset location and what functional implication that may have going forward. It is, I think, for the therapists and the participant to have really open and honest conversations, that the reports we have to write are going to sound awful to the person when they are trying to live their best life and we're having to write about like worst day, worst case scenario. But it's just the way, the system is set up. So we do have to a little bit acknowledge that the reports can be, hefty to read. But I think having that good relationship, and I often will always give my reports to my participant to read before we submit them to the support coordinator to submit with everything else to the planner. But I do always have really honest conversations, is that I'm trying to ensure that the report ensures that the funding that is provided will meet a changing need based on, your scenario and what you need. We may not get it right. We don't have a crystal ball, but that's where the priority pathway and what Kim and Sky were talking about is that as therapists, we stay on top of it. When I talk about being an OT working with people with MND as a concept, I think one of the things I always encourage people, OTs especially, and other therapists, but OTs where I see it, is that if you agree to take on working with someone with MND, that you are okay with taking them on for the long run. People with MND need consistent, reliable, informed therapists to work with them. I saw a lady a while ago and she'd had 4 OTs doing just one little thing, like dit, 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 dit. And it just, of course, you wonder why the NDIS plan didn't exist. It didn't meet what she needed, is because that is how, her therapy had eventuated for whatever reason. So I do very much try and say, create a team, create your team, allow your team to talk to each other, create trust and relationship, because it is really hard to write a report planning for the future if you don't have that open conversation with the person that you're working with. Did that answer that question? I felt like I went around a little bit in circles.
No, it makes sense to us. I will encourage anyone who needs more detail to reach out to your state association, your support coordinator, or the planner that you've got at the NDIA, if any of this is unclear. I've got a bit of a curly one, and I'm not sure who this is for, but the question is, do NDIS plans include support for carers?
Do you mean as in for the informal support person?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll let these guys. Yeah.
Kim, do you want to take it and then Sky, or vice versa?
You want to jump in first, Sky?
I might. Yeah, I might.
Yep.
The easiest answer to that is no, not directly. No. The plans, I guess, the funded supports and the plans that we put together are very much based on the need of the participant. They're very individualized approaches to, I guess, putting together and identifying funding that will support a person with their needs. And as I said, it is very individualized. So it is all around understanding the person's day to day, all around understanding a person's what they can do. Even though, I mean, Sarah talks about how often the reports have to be written about what you can't do. That's correct. But it is around really looking at the individual and the participant. So no, there's not any supports necessarily directly. I guess you could consider some of the supports that are put into a participant's plan indirect supports in a sense for carers. But when we're talking about just someone who may need support and assistance from their caring role, there are a range of, there's many supports and services out there that will support and can support. And as I understand it, Kim, I think that the MND Association themselves have, of course, caring programs or other supports or services that will assist carers with understanding their role and the associated challenges. So I might hand over to you to explain that element of it.
Yeah, I was gonna go there. So yeah, a lot of the MND state associations absolutely very much recognise the carer in their own right. So there are carer programs that might look a little bit differently across the state associations. So please get in contact with your direct state association to find out more. But they are there set up specifically to respond to needs of carers. There are also other services out there in the wider community in terms of care agencies as well. So, we want to very much recognise the role of the carer, as well as, as what Sky said, the plan is indirectly in some ways also there to support carers, which we very much recognise it's a challenging role.
Yeah, I think as being the daughter of someone who had MND, as well as already working in this area, I think some of the supports that supported my family were from palliative care through some of the other kind of health funded services as well. I was in WA, that was a different to Victoria, but I certainly think your support, like our support coordinator at that point from MND WA and the team that were caring for my mum were able to link like my kids in with a service to support them, to understand what was happening to their nana. So there definitely are supports that have always been available. I think sometimes people think the NDIS has to do everything, and they forget that there are other services that have existed, like the community palliative care services, like the MND clinics, like the other, and it is important that the support coordinator knows that and knows those services if they're from MND Victoria, because obviously they work not just as support coordinators, they work as regional advisors. So sorry if I but as someone who's been on both ends of this life, interest, yes, there is definitely. And I certainly know, especially in rural and remote communities, I was in a rural and remote community, the palliative care associations had some really good supports for my families. And I know at the moment, working with someone who lives in a rural and remote community, the palliative care nurse, even though he's not imminently palliative, as in not dying, but that is the main support for the family at the moment that has been arranged through the support coordinator in that area.
Fantastic, great advice. I would like to thank you all for your time, for your advice, for your honesty. We have a poll that pops up on the screen right now, a mini evaluation of this webinar. If you could fill that in, that would be really helpful for us. I'd also really like to thank all the people who've contributed their ideas and their experience to this webinar, but also our broader self-advocacy project and the broader work of MND Australia and the state associations. I'd really like to thank the audience for joining us today. We will have been recording this and we'll share it after the webinar, and we'll also go back in writing to any of the questions we didn't get to. I think in summary, you know, being in direct contact with your state association, your support coordinator and your clinic, and also making sure you've got your NDIS planner on speed dial are the key people to help you navigate the NDIS and give you any additional advice that you need. So thank you everyone for completing the poll, but more than that, thanks for being with us today. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Sky. Thank you, Sarah. Shout out to Susan for helping, and of course, Helen, who has been working behind the scenes on making this happen. Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you again online soon. See you soon. Bye.